tried to defend this. I would want some intellectual rigor and consistency and the ability to say this is a massive fuck up of epic proportions and someone's head.
So Piers Morgan is talking about what happened with the Signal Gate. Because that's, we always have to have a catchy name for very serious situations and incompetence in, government. Everything is a joke. Everything is a meme. I mean, we saw the text messages. They were full of like emojis. Yeah, bomb the man with a boom. It's just like, what do I live in? Tim Miller will show up to destroy Dave Rubin. Dave Rubin needs to be destroyed. You can already see his eyes. He's like, I'm tired. I don't want to hear that shit. Like, so, yeah, Tim Miller will show up. And he will destroy Dave Rubin, and Dave Rubin certainly deserves to be destroyed because he thinks that just because his side is doing it, it's all of a sudden great.
It's got to roll, because otherwise it means people don't think it's serious. And Pete needs to stop putting out these statements which try to minimize stuff that is contradicted by his own messages. And I say that as a mate to him. Right, so look, we've got Tim Miller's joined us now. Let me bring Tim in at this stage. Tim, I like your interview with Jeffrey Goldberg, but it just seems to me, and again, just to stress, if it was the other way around, I'd say exactly the same thing. I don't care which side is doing it, but anyone that tries to defend this or downplay the severity of it or play whataboutery or anything else, I think it needs to stop. This needs to be accepted for what it was, a tremendous error which could have had tremendously serious consequences. And if it was a senior military person who'd done it, they'd already be gone.
For sure. Look, to that senior military example, look, Pete Hegseth has already fired several generals. He's fired several people throughout the Department of Defense. So is Elon Musk as part of the DOGE process. Imagine, we're doing the hypotheticals. What about Biden? I think the more apt hypothetical is imagine if, a low-level general who was involved in this operation had texted the exact time and location of a military strike to an anti-Trump journalist. Now, and imagine if that general is one of these woke generals that they're going after. Maybe it's a black general or a woman. Imagine what Pete Hegseth would be saying today. Imagine what Dave Rubin would be saying today. We know what these guys would be saying. These woke generals, they're the deep state. We need a court martial. We need an investigation. This person needs to be fired. I think we can all agree that that is what would be happening today. That person, if they were a 2-star black general or female general and they had done this, they would be fired today. I think that's very obvious. And so, look, Pete Hegseth might be a mate of yours, might be a good person. I don't know. I've never met Pete Hegseth. But to me, you read this signal chain, and this looks like it got its way in over his head. And this is not, if General Mattis here, it's impossible to imagine General Mattis texting emojis and all caps pathetic to like a signal group chain, preparing them for when the strikes would be. It's just, it signals to me somebody that's not serious. It's not up for the job. The fact that then on the chain, he says, we have 100% operational security here. And there's someone on the chain he doesn't know.
That is hilarious. That is hilarious. And Dave Rubin deserves to sit there with his face shut, looking dumb. Also, hold on. I really don't want to get Tim on a bad look with the eyes half closed. He's absolutely right. If this would have been, let's just say, we don't even need to do the Biden. I like the way he said that. He was like, if this would have been a low-level person who sent this to an anti-Trump journalist, they would call for his execution. Every last one of them. They would, these MAGA people, they would certainly, they'd be like, deport him now. And Dave knows that. Dave knows that. Why is this any different? Like, I'm not saying, look, just have the same energy. It doesn't happen.
You didn't check to make sure you knew everybody on the chain. I think it shows just an unbelievable lack of seriousness. And I think clearly if this was one of the woke generals that Pete Hegseth doesn't like, they would be fired today and there would be a DOJ investigation targeting them.
All right, Dave Rubin, a lot to unpack there, but I mean, a lot I agree with, I have to say. Look, let's talk about the signal aspect. If they, as you say, and I've seen that report, if they were encouraged to use Signal, and in fact it had been put on a lot apparently of their phones and so on when they came into their positions. So they're allowed to use Signal, which is deemed to be one of the more secure ways of communicating. And you believe, as Pete Hegseth clearly did, that you've only got on there the Secretary of State, you know, the Defense Secretary, the National Security Advisor, and so on. In other words, all the senior members of the cabinet that would be involved, plus one or two hand-picked staffers who are at a very high level. If you assume that's who you're talking to privately, then I'm not too fazed about emojis and stuff like that. You've got to have some presumption, I think, when you're conversing.
I feel the same way too.
With people.
I feel the same way. Like, I'm sorry, it does look. We talk about decorum. Look, Jasmine Crockett went up there and talked about somebody in a wheelchair. It was not cool. Decorum, right? This is the right who always talks about decorum. Y'all are talking about bombing people as if it is a, like, you know what I mean, like a video game, like World of what I don't know, Call of Duty. Boom, bomb, bing, bang, boom. What? Okay.
At that level, that you presume to be that level, that it will remain private. So I'm not sure I can get too exercised about that part of it. The thing that still exercises me, though, is just that if it hadn't been Jeffrey Goldberg, but had been somebody who wanted to really damage the administration, they really could have done, and you could have seen American planes blown out the sky.
Sure. Look, there's a couple of things going on here. First off, I think your guest in the center, I'm sorry, I don't remember the congressman's name. I think he said it was illegal to use Signal in these chats. Now, again, Ratcliffe, who is the CIA director, is saying, as you just said again, that it was preloaded on their computers and devices. So I don't think that's illegal, but if there's some legal portion of this.
Well, just for the record, it's
you are not allowed to share classified material over Signal.
Well, just to introduce you again, Jake, for Dave, it's Jake Auchincloss, who's a Democrat congressman from Massachusetts. So, Jake, you want to respond to him?
Okay, so, well, there's some issue as it pertains to whether
you
Signal
cannot
should
share
or shouldn't have
classified
been used.
material
We
over
can all
Signal.
accept that.
Okay, so that's interesting. So, all right, so Congressman, just to be clear, it is illegal to share classified information over Signal. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, the military has its own entire network. They have SCIFs inside the homes of every senior military commander. They have SCIFs co-located with the Secretary of Defense precisely so that they are not putting highly classified operational plans on commercial messaging apps.
Yeah, I thought they would too. I did think. I said, now wait a minute. Like, I'm sure if they're using Signal, then they're just using Signal. But for certain things, I would have imagined there was an intranet. You know how much I know that there's an intranet? At the hospitals, there are intranets where it's classified, like we can text doctors because it's an intranet. And the Pentagon doesn't have that? This is a setup to make Vance look good. Yes, because Vance comes out looking more like the America First president. But the right wing isn't ready for that conversation.
It's illegal, full stop. And Pete Hegseth needs to own that accountability, because if this happened to a corporal or a captain or a general, their career would be over. He shouldn't have this job in the first place, and my goodness, he certainly shouldn't have it now.
Dave, I mean, if it turns out that that is...
Great answer. Who's this guy? We like him.
Correct, and I don't dispute what the congressman just said. Then, you know, should Pete Hegseth consider his position? It's a legitimate question which Republicans would be asking of a Democrat.
I don't know. I can only hear the information that you're hearing on the fly the same exact way. If it turns out that they were told you are not allowed to put classified information in a Signal chat, and they went ahead and did it, even though it was preloaded on their computer, and Ratcliffe testified that he was briefed by people at the CIA about using that stuff, well, then there's a secondary problem. And also, it should be reiterated, I don't think anyone here is defending the fact that Mike Waltz apparently let this guy into the chat. So there is some intellectual consistency here. And it's up to Trump. Trump has to decide what he wants to do right now. Does he think this is a big enough scandal and it's worth firing a guy that he just brought into NSA or not?
It's not up to Trump. See, this is the problem with the way Republicans... This is the problem with the way Republicans are acting these days, is they act like a board of advisors.
Democrats just had 4 years of a president with dementia and a completely unqualified cabinet and virtually everyone that had anything to do with it. So tell me more about the Republicans.
The Republicans.
That is gaslighting. Republicans are acting like Trump is the king right now and everything he does is right. Okay? You know how I know? Because I was in that camp a year ago. Okay? I was. And I woke up from it. And the country is headed for some serious issues. I abstained my vote because the way I look at it is that I'm progressing to a thought process of people who don't believe in answering to labels. I am a Christian, so I don't have to get involved with all of this. So progressive is it can be, I'm not even like, look, we need to progress to listening. How about that? Because it is dangerous. Everything Trump does is a W. Well, there's speech laws being written. We bombed Somalia, and I don't know what ISIS, they're not going to tell us what ISIS people, generals they got. They're not going to, they used to tell us things like that. They're not going to tell us that. And I've looked through different like military articles to see like what's the details on this strike. I can't find any details. Government says done, it is good now. War is based. If I didn't believe in God, I would be petrified right now. Absolutely petrified. But anyway, there are some people who are waking up to the fact that not everything Trump does is good, especially when he has a whole cabinet surrounding him, right? It's not just him making the decision.